the Culinary Institute of Charleston. Thanks for taking some time, Kevin.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I'm excited to talk with you. It seems like years and years ago when we talked and had you on the podcast as part of our good friend Chef Farmer Matthew Rayford's episode. And go check that out, everybody. bestservedpodcast.com, Matthew Rayford's episode. We got a little glimpse of Kevin, and that was just a couple months ago. A lot has happened in a couple months. So let's start. Chef instructor at the Culinary Institute of Charleston. You know, I've heard a lot of what's happening with culinary schools are shut down. They're trying to do online. So talk about what's happening with you and your students kind of in this time.
Yeah, I mean, like all culinary schools, we've had to pivot to doing everything online and, faced with the challenges of having students to continue to be engaged in classes. And then, of course, based on our educational system, we still have to make sure that they're doing the lab part, so which means that they're actually cooking and they're doing the physical work of cooking. So we've had to be pretty, creative on how to do that, and sending them videos of me, say, doing some knife cuts, and then saying, okay, now you need to make sure you have some carrots and onions and tomatoes and parsley or whatever. Now you have to basically do what I did on a video and send it back to me for evaluation and grading. Unfortunately, of course, once we get further along in the advanced part of it, we don't get the opportunity to, of course, taste the food. So we're just basically kind of looking at making sure that they at least are getting the techniques down as far as understanding how to hold a knife, how to actually cut an onion, how to saute a piece of chicken or grill a piece of fish or so on and so forth. And then, of course, not necessarily all that challenging because part of the class is already online. So a lot of times they have all the lecture material, they have PowerPoints, they already may have some videos that they have to view prior to coming to class anyway. So it's just now getting them to do the lab part at home and, getting them to embrace the technology and be able to it's really weird. I'm just on this video by myself cooking, but they have to do it. Of course, if they want to maintain grades. But and then of course, for me, I've always had a very close connection with my students, so I'm always on email with them. I have their phone numbers. I text them every morning, as a reminder, hey, this assignment is due, or hey, Chef Mitchell is out here. If you ever need anything, you need any help, we still have to continue with the business of education. So getting them registered for the following semesters and doing that over the phone can be challenging because there's so many screens on our computers that we have to go to get them in the right classes. But, it's something that we have to do. And unfortunately, right now, it's the world that we live in. And, we have to embrace it. And for me, one thing is making sure to get through a class and pass it to go on to another class. And, some of the classes that I'm teaching now, or we just finished, are classes that students need to graduate. So this is like their last class. And if they don't go through me, then they're not going to graduate. So, we have to also be very accommodating to some of the issues that the students have, because as you know, restaurants across the country have shut down, and of course a lot of our students worked in these restaurants, so now they're not working. They're trying to collect unemployment. So there's going to be some issues of how do I make them go to a grocery store and purchase goods for a class when it's like, well, I'd rather pay my rent, and we get that. So we're going to be working through that challenge, as well as possibly ordering the food through our food system like we would normally do, and then we would pack kind of care packages for each student, and then have the students come, say, to the back loading dock of the school and pick up their package for the week with all the ingredients that they need. And then they take them home and do the video and then send it back. And then, of course, whatever it is that they're making, that's food that they can feed their families.
Yeah, I'll take you back. I'm very interested when you're talking about making these videos. As an instructor, as a chef, I know myself, a lot of times I'll show a technique and then the follow-up is watching them execute that technique.
It's starting to sound a little bit robotic.
All right, hold on. We'll fix this technology. I'm gonna disappear for a second. We're gonna make it happen. It's par for the course, my friend. This is it.
Not a problem. Not a problem.
So when you're creating these videos, you have to be really thoughtful of making sure that you are clearly understood, that it's very simple for them to be able to execute that technique. Because when you're face to face, you show them, you watch them, and then you amend the way that you go about telling them to do it based on what they did or didn't do. You're having to execute that in one shot without the interaction back and forth, and then to see it from them. So I'm very interested in how you're thinking about that to potentially even improve your ability to communicate a certain technique as you are by yourself versus having that interaction. Have you noticed that for yourself?
Yeah,
The way that
you're right. It's a challenge because if I'm in the kitchen and I see them, I can see that their flame is too high. I can easily say, hey, cut your flame down or whatever. And it definitely makes me really think about how I approach the video and really, sometimes you even have to, in essence, kind of dumb things down to its lowest common denominator so the students really understand what the technique is and get them to understand how to control the heat, how to place the food in the pan without burning themselves or grease splashing up on them or things like that. So it makes me really kind of think about, okay, well, what if I was this student looking at this video? How do I want the chef instructor to really explain how to do that? And we have to be overly communicative in the videos and really step by step, one by one, show them, okay, this is the first thing you do is this. Then you go to step number 2. Then you go to step number 3. And if something happens in step 2, then you have to go back and explain to them, well, if this happens, this is why it happened. And then offer them, ways of being able to correct some of their own mistakes. And unfortunately, by the time I see the video, I'm only seeing everything that they've done, and I'm grading them on what they've done. And I make them aware of that. So, whatever you send me is what I'm going to grade. So you better be really on top of it and watch the video several times and even watch other videos. There's some really great videos on YouTube where there's people doing some really good cooking techniques. And for me, it doesn't always have to be me doing it. Like I embrace other, if I see a video and there's a chef instructor from another school that's doing a really great video and I think is really getting the point across, for me, I don't think there's anything wrong with me using that video and sending it to them and saying, hey, this is chef so-and-so, this is how he or she are doing it, because it also allows me to get them to understand that every chef is not going to break down a chicken the same way. There's 100 ways of breaking down a chicken, and this is the way I do it, and this is how I'm going to show you. But your chef where you work or a chef that you've seen on the video is going to do it 30 different ways. For me, it's getting them to understand, choose a way that's most comfortable for you. And what is very important to me is the end result. Sometimes it's like, I don't care how you get here as long as it's done properly. But at the end, when I look at that chicken, it's done properly. I could care less really how you got to it, as long as you are following the basic instructions. And once again, for me, understanding that, I'm not the only chef on the planet.
Oh, Kevin, I absolutely love that thinking, because sometimes you can feel that way if you're the chef or the instructor, like it's my way or the highway kind of mentality. And I like the fact that you're saying there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat. And sometimes like finding another chef's video might be like having your cool uncle tell you the same thing your parents have been telling you again and again and again. You just don't listen. I also, with your videos, how are you communicating what the hell medium high heat means? Like we take for granted so many things that we think we know. It's like, oh, it's medium high heat. Like, what the hell does that actually mean? But we say these things like you're supposed to know, and then people go, oh, okay, and they pretend like they know when they should really ask the question. To your point of the flame high. So how are you?
And that's a challenge. That's a challenge because not everyone has a gas stove. You have electric. Some stoves are radiant heat, where they turn bright red and they're hot as hell, and you have to try to understand the difference between high and low. And well, what number do we put it on, chef? And it's like sometimes it's hard to kind of explain that to them, via video. In the classroom, of course, hey, you feel that heat, or you can see the flame, and you can see like if you're trying to sear a piece of chicken or whatever, you see it's getting too dark. You know automatically, hey, I may need to turn this down. So I just tell them that they need to kind of feel for themselves based on the style of stove that they have. And I always tell them just to err on the side of caution. And if I would say turn it down lower than what you think. And then, hey, if it takes a little bit longer for you to cook that piece of chicken, then hey, once again, you've achieved the objective. It may have taken you a little bit longer than it would have if you were in an actual kitchen or a professional kitchen, but the end result is, a properly seared piece of chicken that is cooked properly and that is not, going to be served raw. And my students know that that's a sin. That's the worst thing they can do is come to me. And there's a class where there's a chicken dish that we do, is chicken chasseur. It's an old classic French chicken dish, hunter style, with shallots and tarragon and things like that. And it's one of my favorite dishes in that particular class. So when we are doing that, when they come to me with their chicken and they're smiling, hey chef, I got this chicken, I'm on a high too. I'm like, yeah, this is one of my favorite dishes. But what brings me down is when I cut into it, and when it's totally uncooked, or it's then plus it's also just right at the edge of that. It's pink. It's maybe another 2 minutes in the oven or in that sauce, it would be perfect. And they know, like, as soon as I see that, then my high, it's just like, and they know. And of course, if it's something that I can't taste, I can't evaluate it, which means it can't be graded. So, I just, at home, they know their stoves because they use them at home. I basically just say use your own kind of knowledge of your own stove, whether it's gas, electric, radiant, even if you have a conduction burner that you use, you just have to kind of play with it and just understand that the heat is going to be different in all four of those. And you just have to kind of figure it out. And that's what cooking is about, I think, too. It's kind of like you got to figure things out on your own. You can't always have the chef. You have to figure it out and kind of work your way through and maneuver that pond and to try to understand, what the chef is really trying to get you to do.
I love it. I absolutely love it, because here's what I'd say. You already are a thoughtful and creative communicator, and that's clear just in the way that you have been. But now the fact that you have to reimagine even the way that you communicate as somebody who's a good communicator, I know that you will come out of this a better instructor. So silver lining.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Because you're put into an adverse situation. And we in the hospitality industry at every level, we love adverse situations. We feed off of like bad news more than we feed off good news sometimes, like we like to be able to roll with the punches. So
it's like when you're in the kitchen and you're about to head into a 300 cover night and that cook calls out and it's like but you still push through and you still get those covers out and the food is just as good as if that cook was there or not. So this business, you're right. And what I'm really concerned with is that the effects of what we're going through right now with COVID is that it doesn't discourage people from wanting to be in this profession, because unfortunately this is a vulnerable profession to be in, because we're in close quarters, we handle people's food. it's very important, and people think that, oh, you just put food in a pan and put it on a plate. It's so much more than that. It's a lot deeper than that, and I hope that once again people are not discouraged, but we will have to persevere, and we will have to come up with new ways of reassuring people that the food is safe and that we've taken every precaution to
Yep.
make sure that it is safe.
Yeah, I really appreciate that thinking. And so, have you had those conversations with students as they are unsure of what's going to happen? They're feeling the trepidations of what's going on in the industry as a whole, and saying, "Do I really want to go into this industry that's in
Yeah.
complete turmoil right now?" Have you had those conversations?
Yeah, I've had conversations. I've had students who've actually wanted to drop my classes and think about doing something else. And you know, first and foremost, as an educator, I have to continue to encourage them to finish their education. And I tell them that, hey, even if you don't particularly go into this field, it's still nice to have that degree or that certificate because it shows that you committed yourself to a formal education and you have that piece of paper. And I also, I have to be very empathetic because I also understand that, hey, I know you didn't sign up. This class is a lab class, and we're supposed to be cooking. And the one class that I have had issued. I mean, I was finally able to create this Southern cuisine class based on my research and coming back from Ole Miss and doing those things. And it was tied to our public restaurant. So we're going to be able to feed the public this food, and I was going to be able to take the students through the South through food and get them to understand that Southern food is not just all about what we think of the deep South, fried chicken, mac and cheese, and so on and so forth. That there's so many regions of the South that make up the food, and understand that, hey, in the Mississippi Delta, tamales are considered Southern food, right?
Yeah.
And when, of course, we got through the first week of class, and right after that first week, that's when it really hit, and we had to shut everything down. And then of course I had to pivot that class to totally online. And yeah, it was heartbreaking for me because it's like, man, I finally got this class, and I had 12 students
This
in
is
the
what you've been
class.
working for.
And we were going to cook this really great food, and I was going to, show people a different way of looking at Southern food, and we couldn't do it. And I understand students are like, well, chef, this is not what I signed up for. But I'm like, well, if you drop this class or withdraw, for one, it may affect your GPA, it may affect your financial aid, and also, especially if you're getting ready to graduate, I'm like, you're so close. I understand, but just finish the class and get your degree and graduate. And I've already had students say that when we get back to normal and I can run this class again, that they're going to take the class again, whether they have to you know register for the class or not. They're just going to be in the class and audit class because this is a class that they really wanted. And I really appreciate them for wanting to do that and take a class. For one, not going to get any financial aid, in a class that they just are going to be in the class on top of their own schedules.
Yeah.
And it's a great thing, and I think I owe a lot of that to the fact that I try to be really empathetic and understanding, and also understand that, hey, I was a culinary student too. Fortunately, I didn't have to go through, or fortunately did not have to go through, a pandemic while I was in culinary school. But once again, like you said, we have to adjust and adapt to the environment that we're in, and just keep on persevering and getting these students to love this industry. Even though it's a crazy industry, and you work a lot, and you're with people you work with more than your own family most times, and holidays, and it's of course a high drug rate, alcohol rate, and so on and so forth because of the pressure that we're under. But if you can get through it and persevere, I mean, it's one of the greatest things that you can be in.
Yeah, and hearing you talk about the Southern food class and then being able to tie that to the restaurant, just for everyone out there that doesn't know, that is why Kevin is on this earth. That is his mission. He is an ambassador just from the soul when it comes to Southern cuisine and everything that he's done. We'd need 6 more podcasts to be able to go into the depth that's in this man's head. And that's been rewarded in a way. So I was so happy to hear you say that, and simultaneously so sad that we, the community at large, your students, Charleston, isn't going to be able to experience that now. But I know you're not going to give up on that. I know whenever we get back, you are going to bring that cuisine and really that heritage. And so with that, perfect segue, because you are now an ambassador for the state of South Carolina when it comes to its food heritage. So talk about that a little bit, because that's amazing.
Yeah, it's definitely an amazing thing to be involved in. And the ambassador program for the state was, I believe, created about 5 or 6 years ago by the former governor of the state, as a way to recognize the beauty of South Carolina products, produce, livestock, and how they're produced, so on and so forth. And it's a thing where there are 4 chefs that are chosen every year, and each chef is chosen from a different part of the state. So for me, I'm in the Low Country, so I represent the Low Country of South Carolina, and basically chefs are nominated by other chefs, by other people in the industry, and all the nominations go to the South Carolina Department of Agriculture, and also the Parks and Recreation Tourism Department, and they go to the governor as well, and the governor basically has the last say on who is going to represent which part of South Carolina. And then you get a really cool email, basically for one stating that you can't tell anybody just yet until it's officially announced. But hey, you've been selected as a South Carolina Chef Ambassador for the year of 2020 to represent the state. And what we do is, a lot of it initially, before COVID, was to travel throughout the state and outside of the state and do lectures and demos and events that promote South Carolina products, produce, so on and so forth. And then you go to the governor's mansion, and there's this big press conference, and they announce the 4 chefs that are going to be that are going to represent the state. And then of course we do events, and we actually got through our first event, which was the Charleston Wine and Food Festival, back in March. And actually that was kind of like the week before everything kind of just came crashing down, as far as staying at home and not traveling. But it still is a very huge honor, and we like being at Trident. We've been able to pivot a lot of our marketing to more of a social media base, where they ask each chef to submit recipes or make videos that talk about promoting South Carolina goods and products, so on and so forth. And they post things up on Instagram and up on Facebook and on the website. So we're still able to promote our state and promote the beautiful, fresh local produce, and the meats and things that are produced here, and even some of the spice rubs. Of course, there's certified South Carolina bourbon. That it's so many products that we can promote and use in our dishes. And I hope we can get back to some normalcy, because we do have an event coming up in September at Greenville, South Carolina, called Euphoria, which is another food and wine based event. But there's another big event that we're supposed to be going to in October. We're supposed to be doing a dinner at the James Beard House. So I hope that we can get back to some sense of normalcy, because who doesn't want to cook at the Beard House?
It's huge
tell me
honor.
Someone that doesn't, I'll tell you they're lying, because who doesn't want to cook at the Beard House?
It's unbelievable. And so, Low Country is really the emerging sound again.
Yeah.
All right, let's do this again. Hold on. We're going to make it happen. I sometimes like when it doesn't work. It just feels nothing quite works like it's supposed to. So low country. Low country is kind of the buzzword within the emergence of Southern food in kind of the modern zeitgeist of what's happening in culinary right now. And Charleston's very much at the forefront of a lot of that. Give everyone the elevator pitch. What is low country cuisine?
Well, for me, low country is for me it's cuisine that's connected to the ancestors, to those specifically, enslaved people who basically make or made what food is today. They are the reason why we eat the dishes and we do the things that we do today. Also, of course, some of the other influences that come in from Spain and from the British, so on and so forth. But when you break it down, it's all about those enslaved African Americans who create this food once again that we know as the South. And then, of course, for me, it also has to deal with coastal cuisine, and because we're of course Charleston's off the coast, so it's always about seafood and always about that beautiful red shrimp that comes right off the coast of South Carolina, and some of the other local types of fish, the trigger fish and so on and so forth that come from this coast, that make up low country cuisine. And once again, it's just a cuisine that it's beautiful. It's a beautiful cuisine, and along with fusing it and talking about Southern cuisine, for me, it's something that was I always say it embraces the beauty and the tragedy of the South. Like this beautiful food comes from this tragic event that happens in the South as it relates to slavery and Jim Crow and so on and so forth. But it's still a great way for me to honor those ancestors and say, hey, this is something of beauty that comes out of that tragedy.
And honestly, hearing you tell that story and then thinking about what's happening right now, what beauty is going to come out of this moment of turmoil and tragedies, I'm very interested. You already talked about you becoming an even better chef instructor because the challenges put in front of you. Thinking about how people now are going to go more into their roots because the world has gotten really small for us. It's literally our four walls, right? And so we're going to think about and reflect on that. So I appreciate that. And so that's been a big part. You as a historian, on top of being a chef, you as telling the stories of enslaved people and the cuisines that have come from that heritage. And so perfect segue again. You're really good at this. This is not me at all. This is you laying it down. So you have a manuscript, a book on the table that's getting itself into publication. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, the book, of course, any book is always a labor of love, just like my thesis was. But it's called Taste the South, South Carolina's Foods and Their Stories. I wrote it in conjunction with Dr. David Shields, a professor at the University of South Carolina, who has been very instrumental in my growth and pushing me towards the path that I've been on for the past several years. And basically the book addresses South Carolina ingredients and some of the iconic dishes and also products that come out of South Carolina. So we write about Duke's mayonnaise and Blenheim ginger ale. And if you look at the book, pretty much almost like a dictionary. All the ingredients is listed in alphabetical order, and each entry per se is an average of 2 to 3 pages. Some are a little bit longer than that. Okay. That tells the story of that dish or ingredient or that product, along with whether if it's say it's okra, we talk about some of the agricultural aspects of okra, where it's grown, the different types of okra. Then we also, there's some entries that have some anecdotal stories, some funny things about the history of that particular ingredient. And then we also include some recipes. And a lot of the recipes we include are like traditional old recipes that come from excuse me, newspapers of the late 1800s, the early 1800s. And then there's some contemporary recipes that I write specifically for specific ingredients in the book. And the manuscript, we turned that in probably basically about 2 weeks ago. So it's definitely on the shelf for publishing. And we got word yesterday from the editor that the plan is for it to continue on that schedule. They don't think COVID is going to affect the schedule of the actual publication. So we're eyeing spring 2021 for the official release of the book, and I'm just really excited to put this forth. And there's a lot of really cool things that are going to be in the book. There's about 90, I believe about 95 entries that and of course David and I going through it together, really the challenge was to really figure out which things were going to actually be in the book, because there's so many things that you can write about as it relates to the state of South Carolina. So of course but we have to include some of the iconic okra soup, and purlus, and of course talk about Carolina Gold rice. And but we talk about the Lady Baltimore cake that has some history in Charleston, and how its creation. And we'll also talk about strawberry shortcake. And there's the once again, and I actually did the entry for Duke's mayonnaise, and telling the story of how Duke's mayonnaise comes about, and how Duke's of course becomes the queen of mayonnaise in the South. And then of course for me, people that know, I'm originally from the North, so I talk a little bit about my struggle between, Dukes because I live in the South, and Hellman's because I come from the North, right? And there's boiled peanuts we write about in the book. There's so many other really cool things that that are in the book. So I'm really anxious for it to come out, and of course I'll keep you posted as we get closer to an actual release date. We do know that there'll be some marketing behind the book. We also know that we will plan on doing some book signings throughout. The book will be released in hard copy form and also as an ebook for those who like reading books, ebooks on Kindle, and so on and so forth. You can just get the book on Kindle as well. So we're really excited about it. And I'm anxious. I'm hoping that maybe this turns into, maybe we do a part 2 and mention the other stuff that we cut short or cut out of the book. Yep. And maybe we focus in more on some more desserts. Maybe we also start looking at beverages and drinks. We do talk about sweet tea in the book, but there's so many other things that that make the state of South Carolina really good as it relates to food.
Yeah, what I really appreciate about what I'm sure I envision this book being is that your ability to connect the dots between humans, past humans, and we're specifically talking about enslaved people, the agriculture of the time and how that fueled what the foods were, the agriculture of today and what opportunities or challenges that creates, and then making it contemporary, that you had some new recipes. So it connects all the dots, because sometimes if you just look back, it's hard for us as chefs to contextualize how we might apply that methodology or technique or ingredient to today. So laying that roadmap, oh man, I really appreciate that. And Kevin, I also hope you do an audio book, because I'm really into Audible and I want to listen to your voice talking about mayonnaise and her making little tea sandwiches for all the soldiers. Like, I want to hear that story coming from you.
Yeah, it's a really cool story. It's a really cool story. When I started researching, I was like, wow, this is how Duke's mayonnaise started. And now it's like this, the quintessential, the iconic mayonnaise of the South. Yeah. And I think we're also going to eventually talk about hot sauce, because of course, there's Red Hot Turkey in the North that I love. Then you come here, there's Texas Pete, there's Cholula, there's so many other different things that come from the South. And for me, it's a really great thing, because I can not only talk about the South, but bring in my own experiences being someone from the North who who really loved their counterparts. So like Hellman's was it for me, and then I come here, everyone's like Dukes. I'm like, I'm not Dukes. I'm from the north. Where's the Hellman's? But then, of course, at culinary school, when we order mayonnaise, we always order Dukes.
Yeah.
So of course, it's something that, you know, once again, it's all about that adapting. And Dukes is wonderful mayonnaise. I love it. But of course, being a child of the North, I still have my heart still belongs to Hellman's. So
That's right. She threw a couple extra egg yolks in there. You know us chefs.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Always flavor. So I always appreciate that about Dukes. And so books. I'm really hyped on the book that you're writing, but I also always we end with some playlist items. So give us a book or two as we're in anticipation of your book. Maybe some books that that could help us think about the South, think about the history of cuisine, anything like that. You got a couple recommendations for us?
There's I mean, David wrote a book called Southern Provisions that came out in 2017, I believe. And in that book, it talks about connecting those dots. It talks about basically it's all about a revitalization of a cuisine, and it talks about how there are products that were heavily favored years ago, and then we lose those products, and how it's important for us to get back to where we come from or where we came from as it relates to Southern food. It talks about, you know, bringing back, you know, of course, the Carolina Gold rice and bringing back Sea Island red peas and all those things that we grew and we ate years ago in the 1800s, so that were farmed. And now it's great to see people like him, myself, Anson Mills, Geechee Boy Mills,
Yep.
bringing these products back and just basically restoring a cuisine. And that's a book I always push my students to if they really want to know about ingredients. You know, but there's so many other books out there. You know, actually, you know, I have a reading list that I created for my students for that Southern cuisine class. So they were looking at John T. Edge's pot liquor papers. They're looking at Michael Twitty's Cooking Gene. They're looking at Tony Tipton Martin's The Jemima Code, and now her new book called Jubilee. They're looking at, you know, there's Todd Richards who writes a book called Soul, and then he explains his love for Southern food in his way through these 150 recipes that may not traditionally be Southern in the eyes of most people, but he's telling his story through those ingredients, through those recipes. You know, there's just so many books to read. You know, The Edible South by Marcy Cohen Ferris. It's also a really good book if you really want a good basis on some of the history on how food comes to the South and understanding how pigs come to us from the Spaniards, pretty much, and then of course all these heritage breeds that are making a comeback. There's just so many books out there to read, you know, and I'll be willing to, you know, supply people with the list. I mean, because of course a lot of these books I had to read when I was a student at Ole Miss, you know, finishing up my master's. So it's just so many, you know, these books come from many different vantage points, but it's all connected to the South.
Yeah, and to the humans, the people. That's what I appreciate so much about it. You talk about, you know, Geechee Brothers, you talk about Anson Mills, you talk about any of the products. There's always a person that is so unbelievably passionate behind those products to bring them to the forefront. They're their life's work. So I really appreciate that. And yes, let's have you get into the comments of this video and list out some of these books, because several of them I'm very familiar with and a couple of them never heard of. So I'm excited to potentially dig into some of those as well. I got a long reading list from doing this show for sure. So I'm really appreciative of the work that you're doing and the thoughtfulness that you have in this moment. And I cannot wait to come to Charleston to see you, to see our friends Mike Latta and Jason Stanhope at Fig. So much amazing things happening when it comes to agriculture, when it comes to restaurants, when it comes to cuisine. So Kevin Mitchell, thank you so much for taking some time.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And just going back to, you know, those producers, I mean, these things like Anson Mills and Geechee Boy, these are things that people can purchase and have shipped to their homes. You don't have to be a chef in a restaurant or in a school to order, a 10-pound bag of Carolina Gold rice from either Geechee Boy or from Anson Mills. They ship it directly to your house. So, and so it's very important that people know that, because you want these ingredients, just go to their website, order it, it gets shipped right to you. Now you have some beautiful Sea Island red peas to cook at home, and you have this rice, and you have bene seeds, and you have bene seed oil, and you have, even Geechee Boy now is doing black eyed peas, which they just released. So, you're out there listening, you want to really start working with these ingredients, just go ahead and purchase them, and just go to the website and have it shipped direct to your house. And also, especially in this specific time, we have to remember that we need to start really supporting those local farmers, those local producers. Go to your farmers markets on the weekends and buy produce from them. Keep that money in that local economy. And because these farmers, especially a lot of farmers, they have so much stuff that they were shipping and giving for restaurants and other big hospitals and so on and so forth, but now they don't have any means to do that, especially with the restaurant is closed unless they're doing curbside or to go, but they're still not ordering the same amounts that they were ordering before, right? So go and support the Anson Mills, the Geechee Boys, any of your local farmers out there, because they have beautiful stuff. I mean, this past Saturday, I went to the farmers market and got some beautiful locally grown produce that I've been cooking with in my kitchen. And like I said, with the way things are now is the time to really start focusing on local and looking at people like Slow Food and all these other organizations that that their mantras are centered around supporting local.
I love it. Yeah, we've been talking a lot about spend your money now where you want to spend it later, and investing in your community is the best way to spend that money. Kevin, my friend, have a great day. I cannot wait to talk to you again. Be good.
You too. All right, take care. You too.
Cheers. Yes, a wealth of knowledge. Talking to that guy inspires me so much around just cooking in general, but specifically with Southern food, just passion, unbelievable passion about the history, about the struggle of that history, about the heritage of the cuisine itself, the humans behind it, the ingredients, the agriculture, connecting the dots all the way to being contemporary modern with what's happening in the culinary scene in Charleston, South Carolina at large, the South as a whole, and just this country. So grateful for this conversation with him. Tomorrow's episode's Wednesday. It's Wednesday tomorrow? I'm pretty sure it's Wednesday tomorrow. I have Zuri Resendez, who is the sous chef at Catavella in Denver, and great guy. We had him on the podcast. Amazing. As well as, we'll keep it in Denver, David Gade, distiller, co-owner of Deviation Distilling, also in Denver. We'll talk tomorrow as well. So noon Mountain Time, 2 p.m. Eastern for Zuri, 1 p.m. Mountain Time, 3 p.m. Eastern with David Gade. Thank you as always. Like he said, go support some local today.